right, we have concluded with executive session. There's nothing to report out. We are finished a little bit early, so the board has elected to go through just our consent agenda items, and then we'll save the balance of the budget report and the superintendent's report for 7:30, when we had anticipated coming back into public portion. At this point, we will resume public session, and we will lead with the pledge. Mr. Superintendent, will you lead us in the pledge today?
Sure, President, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. All right, just a reminder of the emergency exits to my right and to the audience left. In the event of an emergency, please make sure you go through these exits in an orderly fashion. Reminder, this is a smoke-free school district. Smoking is not permitted in the building or anywhere on the school grounds. This is also a hate-free and bully-free school district. So that brings us to item C, the board consent agenda. We need a recommendation for item C, 1 through 8.
Thank you. The administration recommends the approval of board consent items reflected in Schedule C1 through C8.
Okay, do we have a motion? We have a motion by trustee Flippin, seconded by trustee Trent. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all
Oh,
those
I'm
in-
sorry. I'm sorry, I had a question. Sorry. Why is, and maybe I missed if you mentioned, H 2.2 and 2.3, why are they on there?
We're not up to.
I thought you just
yet.
said, I'm sorry, did I?
C.
No,
We're on
C.
C.
Oh, I thought you said,
We're on
I'm
C.
sorry.
That's okay, but we'll get there soon. All right, we're on C. C 1 through 8, there's been a recommendation by the superintendent to approve.
There was a motion and a second.
And there's a motion and a second.
So we need to vote.
Trustee Flippin, seconded by trustee Trent.
That was
All
a
right.
part of discussion.
And now, are there any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hands. Seeing all hands raised, the motion carries unanimously. And that brings us to item G. We're going out of order, Madam Clerk.
Yes.
Okay. Item G, board consent agenda for curriculum.
The administration recommends approval of curriculum items reflected in G1 and G2.
Okay, again, we need a motion and a second for G1. Okay, everybody's hands going. Trustee Barry, seconded by trustee Kavanaugh. That was the motion and the second. Any questions? Seeing no questions or discussion, all those in favor, please raise your hands. Seeing all hands raised, the motion carries unanimously. All right, and now that brings us to item H, the board consent agenda for personnel. Do we have a motion and a second? Motion by trustee Barry, seconded by trustee Flippin. And discussion? Yes.
Wait a minute, wait.
Yes?
Did he make the recommendation?
Oh, I didn't ask for your recommendation. We're just going
yeah.
ahead with that.
Yeah, so I don't know if you want me to respond to your question first, or...
It's up to you if it's in
I think
procedures.
Well,
You
you-
make the
you gotta make the
recommendation.
make the recommendation, we'll
So-
make the motion. and-
Got it. The administration recommends approval of personnel changes reflected in Schedules H1 through H7.
And so again, to repeat, we had a motion by trustee, who was the motion?
I made a motion.
Trustee Barry and seconded by trustee Flippin. And now question by trustee.
Yeah, so I guess it's for all of H.2. I'm just, why do we need those to be?
So the probationary periods in the initial appointments were based on 4 years, and it should have been 3 years.
Oh, okay, so this is just a change in the tenure track?
Correct.
Okay.
Now you have to vote.
Yes, thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
No, that's okay. No, I was just looking to see if there were going to be any other questions. All right, so we have the recommendation, we have a motion and a second for H1 through 7. Are there any other questions? Seeing no other questions, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Seeing all hand raised, the motion passes unanimously. And that brings us up to board consent agenda for business in item I.
The administration recommends approval of business items reflected in Schedules I1 through I47.
Bingo.
All right, we have a recommendation to approve items I1 through 47. Motion and a second, please. Motion by trustee Kavanaugh, seconded by trustee Barry. Any questions? Seeing no questions, all those in favor, please raise your hands. Seeing all hands raised, the motion carries unanimously.
Madam President,
Yes.
unless you have it planned later, I mean, can we acknowledge from personnel H.3? You have it, okay.
Well, I wanted to do that now.
Go right ahead.
Typically, it's done at the end, that's why I asked,
Yeah.
if you were doing anything, that's,
Well, no, I'm not doing it as part of my report, but
Yeah.
I do want to acknowledge the service and the contributions Beth Doyle's made to the school district. Today, we approved her tenure. Beth has been, Ms. Doyle's been instrumental in just our restorative practices here, sounding redundant, in our district, as well as our MTSS program. You know, her ability to just like hone in on the data, analyze it, and provide instructional leadership is like second to none. So I feel very lucky and fortunate to work with Ms. Doyle, and truly is an asset to the school district. So congratulations, Ms. Doyle.
I would stand, but it'll take.
we're gonna ask you to stand up. and do this.
And we'll do the more formal recognition at the end of the year with our tenure celebration in June.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I know, the podium is a bit obstructive tonight.
It's okay.
All right, for those who just walked in the room, we finished our executive session a bit early. So we just went through our consent agenda, but we're going to hold off until 7:30 to go through the budget and the superintendent's report. And we'll begin after that. So we will take a short, I just need a motion for a recess. We'll take a 15-minute recess. Motion by trustee Trent, seconded by trustee Barry. We will take a 15-minute recess to resume at 7:30, and we will. Yes, unanimous?
Yeah.
Unanimously approved for a 15-minute recess until 7:30, and then we will resume the balance of our agenda. All righty? Thank you.
Try to make that call.
Yeah.
Okay, welcome back to the meeting of April 17th, our business meeting of the Board of Education of the South Country Central School District. We're resuming our public portion after a brief 15-minute recess. And we have already completed our consent agenda items for the business meeting. And we're going to start right with communication and announcements and the superintendent's report. Mr. Superintendent?
Don't you have to reopen the meeting?
We just did.
You don't have to have a vote?
No.
Okay.
We're good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I don't think
All right, thank you, President Felice. Welcome to you all. So let me start my superintendent's report. A lot of things happened in the last 2 weeks that I'm really excited about and fun. First, I'm going to begin with the variety show at Bellport High School. And just like the title says, there was a lot of variety and talent in the show. It was a mashup of old Hollywood movies. And when I say old, like movies that I remember watching in high school, so I guess that says something about my age. But they did a lot of mashups of different movies. Really came up with some pretty funny concepts. I love this concept with this Western where, you know, this town is not big enough. How many others are there? So I started out with a show that with 2 people and I expanded, which was pretty hilarious. But again, a lot of talent on the stage. They recreated a scene from Dirty Dancing, which I thought was really funny and fun. But like I said, the multitude and talent in Bellport High School and the energy was really contagious that night. So I had a really great time, not just sitting for the show, but interacting with the students who participated, including cast and crew. And I even got to take a selfie with Kermit the Frog, who made a cameo appearance in our show. Along the lines of some fun, Bellport High School also hosted the Kindergarten to 3 Ball, which involved a lot of dancing from our K-3 students. These are all 3 buildings combined, Critz, Kramer, and Brookhaven. And of course, it wouldn't be a party if I didn't do selfies with the students, which all had a fantastic time. So I really want to thank our PTAs from the 3 respective schools, as well as our high school PTA and our high school staff for hosting this event. Several hundred kids attended and their families, so it was a lot of fun, a huge success in our gym. It was great just to see our community coming together in a fun and safe way. Moving on to the high school, we had the Evening of Excellence, where we honored our top performing students. Each of the students that were recognized on this evening maintained a 93 or above GPA in high school. We also featured musical accompaniments for our jazz quartet, as well as the playing of the national anthem by our trumpet players. Also a shout out goes to our cadet corps, which I don't have photos for, who did the presentation of the colors, as well as our musicians, as I said. But really what makes the night really special, at least to me, is the fact that our high school seniors have the opportunity to acknowledge teachers that have been impactful in their career as K-12. And those teachers included Ms. Drake, who was presented by Samantha DeLillo. Ms. Drake teaches at Brookhaven Elementary School. We also had recognized Ms. Belford from Kramer Street Elementary School. She was presented by senior Madeline Budress. Mr. Rosa, who was presented by our senior Andy Pedatella. She is a teacher over at Critz. And Mr. Rosa also just earned national accreditation for teaching, which is a great accolade for her, so I want to congratulate her at this point. From Frank P. Long, the students recognized Ms. Nabi, who was presented by Julia Gannon and Claire Canella. And from the middle school, we had Mr. Sherlock, who was honored and presented by Kamani Tucker and Rachel Patry. And finally, from the high school, science teacher Mr. Franek was presented by Tyler Gentile and Jake Little. For all these impactful teachers, I just want to give a big shout out. And you know, we sometimes take for granted the impact that teachers can make, especially teachers as early as kindergarten teachers or information specialists, librarians that really make an impact throughout a student's career. So big shout out to those teachers and to all of our teachers who impact our students in positive ways. We also got to recognize our SAS, which is a 3rd ranked student in high school, Daniel Lukowski, our salutatorian, Jordan Truce, and our valedictorian, Samantha DeLillo. So congratulations to those students for their outstanding work in the academic realm. I also had an opportunity to visit the middle school for their chamber concert, which was a lot of fun. We had our chamber strings, choirs, and clarinets, flute and percussion ensembles, and our all-state performers, which was a lot of fun. Big shout out goes to Ms. Garcia, Mr. Sherlock, Ms. Valenti, and Ms. Hartman, and Ms. Staincat for inspiring our students to perform musically, especially our South Country singers who were fantastic. And it's no surprise that our community has been voted best community for music, which we're very proud of. Music certainly does thrive in South Country. We also hosted the College and Career Fair at Belport High School, featuring over 100 colleges, various career tracks, and our different branches of the armed services. Really successful event, which we opened to our sophomores through seniors, so they could get a kind of a exposure to the different colleges and career choices. Because basically, when we talk about our graduates, we want them to be one of 3 E's. I say it all the time. We want them to be enrolled, employed, or enlisted. And that's really the outcome and the trajectory our students should be focused on. I got to attend with President Felice, and we had a moment where I think we got a little nostalgic and really contemplating going back and doing it all over again, because the energy in the room was so positive. So really great event. So big shout out to our guidance department, Ms. Jennifer Stevel, and the high school staff for putting this together. I got to spend some more time at the high school for some other learning opportunities, like National Poetry Day, where a high school student celebrated the National Poetry Day with a special event that featured poetry stations in the high school's library, where students not only got to read other students' works of poetry, but got to recite them as well. I also want to give a shout out to one of our students, Damaris Sumba, which is a student at Belport High School. She was awarded the 3rd place prize in category E of the Walt Whitman Birthplace Student Poetry Contest on Long Island. So she will be celebrated at the birthplace on Sunday, May 5th. So it's a big shout out to Samaras for her poem entitled Onions. And for the first time for Belport, we finally have students who will be earning the seal of biliteracy. This is a graduation accolade that will go along with our seal of civic readiness. These are students who show proficiency in 2 or more languages. I got to sit in for a couple of the presentations that were made in Spanish and Italian. So big shout out to our world language teachers and ELA teachers who help these students out in preparing the materials necessary to earn this accolade. Monica Tetuan and Jackie O'Hagan are directors of world languages and ELA, and Colleen Oates Robish, or as the kids call her, Miss OR, our librarian at the high school, for organizing a nice event. But really, we want to watch our numbers grow. We have about 10 students who are earning the seal this year, and with the dual language program progressing through the grades, we're hoping to increase that number. And it should be noted that a few of the students weren't natural speakers of the language, so it's good to see them present orally in a language that wasn't their native language. So that was pretty cool. Some more South Country happenings. We survived the solar eclipse. There's a lot of buzz around it, but we're happy to have been able to afford our students and staff members with solar eclipse glasses. It was pretty cool looking and really a scientific celestial event. It was cool to behold. I also had the privilege of going to the Boys and Girls Club Legacy Celebration, where our very own teaching assistant, Demetria, Garantis, oh my God, sorry, I apologize, Demetria, who's honored. She's been a big part of the Boys and Girls Club for a long time. So it was a really nice event. President Felice, Vice President Hayes joined me at this event. So it was really nice to see the community come out to support a great community organization. South Country also represented at the National ASCD Conference in Washington, D.C. The team from South Country featured guidance counselor Faith Thompson-Lee and Brian Del Piaz, who are part of our restorative coaches, as well with our restorative coordinator, Ty Watkins, and our very own Beth Doyle, who did a great job representing our district on a national level. And finally, we just concluded last week our first round of testing for the ELA exams, grades 3 through 5. And I'm happy to report that our participation rates are in fact going up. Brookhaven Elementary School had a 96% participation rate, 100% participation rate at Kramer, 95% participation rate at Fritz Elementary School, and Frankfurt Lawn made some gains at 81%. The biggest opt-out sort of numbers came from our 5th grade, but we're seeing the trend change. And the reason we were asking kids to opt in for the test is because the tests provide valuable data and practice for our kids so that we can best address our instructional needs as a district. So I'm really happy with these results, and we're going to keep plugging away to make sure our kids sit for these tests, which are not fun, but part of life. And finally, I'm really super excited to welcome our Belport Middle School robotics team and Mr. Kanjura, who I'm going to ask to come up to the podium to speak a little bit about their first place winners at the robotics, Sligo First Robotics League competition. Mr. Kanjura, congratulations.
Thank you, everybody. I'd like to first, thank the board for their continued support of this program. It is a very great program to be part of. We've been doing it for a number of years now. We started at the middle school and high school, and it's grown. Now we're at Frank P. Long, so hopefully, we'll get into the elementary schools as well. It is a unique program in that it provides real life experience for the students, both technical and also presentation, because they actually have to present in front of judges. So we won one of the judges awards. The award was for the best design, robot design by a team. We placed well in the competition because the competition is basically a game that you have to play with the robots. It has an autonomous program, and it also has some kind of movement that the robot has to do, and it has to interact with like all kinds of simple machines, and you get a score for that. We placed in the middle of the pack. There was over 20 schools competing at William Floyd High School in February. But the design, the fact that these young people, mostly sixth graders, were able to do this was actually quite the judges were quite impressed. It was their first time doing this. We only had one single seventh grader, which basically led the team, and he was a great guide to the younger students as well. So I'm very happy for your support. I also like to thank Mr. Lattori at the middle school and Dr. Colton for their support as well, and Mrs. De La Rosa at the high school, who was instrumental and with Mr. Hogan in activating this program many years ago. And that's it. Thank you again. And but I'd like to invite my students, who are really the ones that deserve all the thanks. So you guys want to come up? Claudia, this is our seventh grader, Claudia. Eli? Alejandro Shapuri? He's not here. Olivia O'Sullivan? Martin Martin? Lorenzo? Dominic? And Evan. So thank you guys.
And also, Coach Kanjura gets a certificate too.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations to you. We're going to take a photo. I don't know if any of the board members want to join the team for a photo. Stand here.
All of us, or?
Do you have your camera? Well, let's all join in. I like when they're short.
File in and make sure that the certificates are facing up. Are you sure they're all up? There you go. Good job.
Oh, wow.
I don't know where to look.
Look here first.
Paparazzi.
We can maneuver, right?
This is where you need your long arm, is it?
One more. Okay. I'm good at that. They want
Congratulations again.
Thank you. How are you doing?
Congratulations. And then, yeah, I encourage everybody to follow us on social media. These are just little snapshots of our various social media platforms. And there's different ways to keep in touch. You guys can go. Take care.
Thank you.
I just want to take our budget presentation. Congratulations again, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good night. You know, in the past, we've had some of the robotics teams do a demonstration at a board meeting.
Yeah.
We had the high school do it once. I mean, that would be cool if we could see that. I mean, they came, they started picking stuff up around the room and stuff. It was a couple of years ago, I think. They went to a competition, I guess it was after, am I the only one who remembers that?
I went to that competition before.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Well,
really,
the competitions are,
It's very nice.
they're big.
they're amazing, but
All day,
I
too.
think it was the high school team, and I don't know if maybe the middle school might have been a club, whatever it was, but they came and right here, and the thing was cruising around, and they used their arm picking stuff up, and I thought it was really fascinating, so I'd love to see more of that stuff if we can ever get on the schedule.
So again, different ways to keep in touch, our community portal where you can subscribe to our Blackboard Connect messages. All of our social media links are included in this link here on our website, as well as the Superintendent's Corner, which will open up my page with my contact information and my own social media feed. So please keep in touch and keep informed. And I also provide a weekly update, which is like a blog, which is also accessible through the Superintendent's Corner. And that concludes my Superintendent's report. Thank you all for your continued support.
Alrighty. Thank you very much. That brings us to the trustee and advisory committee reports. We'll start with trustee Flippin. Nothing to report. Trustee Puccini.
Nothing for me.
Okay. Trustee Barry.
Not today.
Not today. Trustee Kavanaugh.
Yeah, just a couple of things. We had our Health and Safety Committee meeting the other day. I can't read my handwriting, but we did discuss some updated training on the subject of workplace violence. We discussed some updated safety protocols for the coming school year. Also, some repair work that's being done, more minor items rather than the major capital improvement projects, but really important safety items, sidewalk and ramp repair, handrails, that sort of thing. And then discussed the determination of threat assessments, where there are potentially threats of violence within a school building. Very informative, very useful, very comprehensive meeting.
Thank you.
I'm gonna tack on to trustee Kavanaugh's report, that one thing about that meeting that interested me was having a representative from NYSER, our insurance carrier, who had a lot of useful information about how they help assess risk and give advice. So that I was glad to hear.
For sure.
And other than that, I enjoyed going to the variety show as well, so that's that.
All right. And I sat in on the meeting, not as a committee member, but as an ex officio member, and echo like the comments that were just made. Okay. And that brings us up to public commentary for agenda items. Do we have any cards? No cards. So we'll move down to the action items for the budget presentation. And I went and took your podium away because I didn't like not seeing cabinet. And now you're up again, so now we have to put the podium back.
There you go. I need to go.
Our district clerk does everything.
She literally does.
Could I just have Tech confirm that the superintendent is in the video shot for the,
He raised his
You
hand.
got a thumbs up.
We move to we'll present that
Yeah.
to the
Okay.
YouTube stream, the actual.
oh, right, it goes, that
So that
goes
people
on.
can visibly see it. yeah.
Terrific, thank you.
All right, thank you, Board of Education. So this is our seventh and final, aside from our budget hearing, budget presentation. This is a night in which we'll vote to adopt the proposed budget for the 2024-2025 school year. So I'm gonna get right to it again by going over our schedule. We've completed 6 budget presentations, and we are April 17th, 2024, where the Board of Trustees will vote on the proposed budget. In terms of process, I've gone over this on each of our presentations. We're finally here in April where we finalize the budget, and we'll present it to the trustees, and we'll have a vote at the conclusion of this presentation. This is followed by a budget hearing in May and the budget vote a little bit later in May. Again, just the considerations, and I'm going to summarize each of our presentations very briefly, but again, the first thing we do is to ensure that the budget development process is consistent with board priorities. Again, we want to develop a fiscally responsible and transparent budget, maximizing efficiency and economy, ensuring that the district is using its resources to deliver the best educational program, and meeting our long-term planning goals. That is directly taken from our board priorities. While there have been increases to certain budget lines, not limited to inflation, entitlements, and staffing and fuel, we continue to engage in a line-by-line analysis of the overall budget, looking to make reductions to accommodate these increases and to better align ourselves with actual expenditures while allowing for contingencies. What that means is we want to make sure that our budget has enough room for the unexpected, which sometimes happens, but we want to make sure that we are, especially like frugal, especially this year considering the cuts to foundation aid that I'll talk about in a minute. So the idea is to, again, on an annual basis, do line-by-line item analysis and really analyze the budget to see where we can reduce to sort of compensate for the increases that we have coming. The use of reserves is an important component of the budgetary planning process, especially again considering that state aid for the upcoming school year has been cut. The idea is again to use the reserves as permissible by mandates and by the law, and to replenish the funds to the greatest extent possible. Typically, the school district will budget the reserves as revenues at the beginning of the budget process and the beginning of the year, and the idea is you replenish whatever amount of money or funds you use from the reserves at the end of the year. We do submit as a reserve plan in June once we close our books or come close to closing our books, but the use of the reserves can change from year to year, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a later slide. And ultimately, our goal is to propose a budget that meets the demands of the school district in terms of operating costs. I know Trustee Hayes always asks, will we have enough money to keep to pay for our operational costs of the school district? And the answer to that is always yes. And we want to ensure that the school district is in a good financial position to address unforeseen costs, as I mentioned, and to have an appropriate fund balance to mitigate future challenges. We also want to make sure that we consider our community when we consider the final tax levy. So getting right to our presentation, our first presentation spoke about the budget process and long-term planning. We spoke about the challenges that we're facing in the upcoming school year. Inflation and the tax cap calculation is always a challenge for school districts. That doesn't change. The federal grants period end date. This is the last year that we had access to the federal funds. That's a challenge that all school districts across New York State had faced. And this is the year where finally those funds are not available to us anymore. The differential building or state aid and bond payments that we've spoken about in the past. What was new this year, again, which was sort of remarkable to a lot of us, was a decrease in foundation aid, which happened for the first time in a very long time. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a later slide. Strategies that we're going to use to mitigate these challenges is, again, ongoing review of programs to reduce expenditures, ongoing exploration of alternative revenue sources, donation grants, etc. Like this year, we applied successfully for a recovery grant to help fund our mental health initiatives. We also applied for a guilt-free community grant to help offset the cost of all of our interventions. So we continue to look for grants to offset expenses or expenditures. Considerations for both cuts in foundation aid, the end of federal funds, and a drop of building aid may involve the strategic use of reserves, which I'll talk about in a later slide. And again, engage in ongoing capital improvement projects because they generate the revenue in the form of building aid. So far last year, we had 2 capital reserve votes. One was for $2.6 million, one was for $2.2 million. Energy performance contract that we're still in the process of working on. We also added a capital transfer budget line, allowing us to allocate $1 million of funds towards capital improvements on an annual basis. We may, at some future point, when interest rates are different, consider future bond proposals. We're not proposing them now, but it's something that will be a consideration perhaps in the future. And finally, we're going to propose, and we actually approved the proposition to have a May capital reserve vote, which I'll talk about in a later slide. Our second presentation talked about the calculation of the tax levy limit and the tax levy. So basically, the tax levy is, as it pertains to school districts, is the local property tax passed by vote to the school district to generate better revenue that's used to fund our general fund and to pay for the cost of educating our community. The tax levy limit, or what we call the tax cap, with some exceptions, is basically limits the amount that local governments and most school districts can increase the tax levy by. The 2% is a number that has been used in many of our narratives, but it's not an accurate, really, depiction of what the tax levy limit is. The tax levy limit is based on an 8-point formula that takes into account different variables. The first 7 steps determines the tax levy limit without any exclusions. This is what we call the base formula. This determines the initial tax levy limit, and then the 8th step factors in exclusions, which include things like our pilots, transfer capital line, etc. The use of the formula is mandated by New York State, and all school districts participate in using this formula to calculate their tax levy limit or their tax cap. And based on our formula, and the one thing I want to point out about this formula, what was different, is the reduction in state aid, which is, again, was very different. Typically, the school district had been receiving about a 3% increase in state aid on an annual basis. When we made 5-year projections last year, we made the assumption that we would have a 1% increase because we sort of felt like there would be a decrease in how much aid would be given. We didn't foresee the fact that state aid would be decreased. The total amount for our school district was $1.2 billion. So again, what this means is we may have to look differently at how we use our reserves to sort of narrow that gap or to mitigate the gap in state aid. So during the second point of this budgetary process, or during this time, we're already starting to contemplate how we would use our reserves differently. This led to the anticipated tax levy limit based on the formula was $69 million, which represents a 2.7% levy-to-levy increase. During our third presentation, we talked about our different budget codes, our administration code, which covers all the administrative costs to run the district, our transportation code, and our unallocated code, or the 9000 code, which covers debt payments, entitlements, and all sorts of other things related to our governmental obligations. The budget codes, again, represent the revenue source. When you see the A, that is our general fund, where we fund all of our operating costs, the function, the object, the location, meaning which building it comes from, and that's how the codes are used. At this point in the budget process, when we looked at our projected expenditures, we were looking at, for these 3 codes, an increase budget to budget of 3.3% at this point in the budget process. This led to our next presentation, which had to do with the 2000 code, which is our biggest code, which covers curriculum and instruction. And that represents all of the costs associated with both what is taught and how it's taught in our classrooms, including staff, supplies, and other miscellaneous expenses. It includes all of our general education classrooms, district-wide special programs, student support outside of special education, because special education has its own set of expenditures and budget lines that fund our special education programs, including tuition to special programs and materials and supplies as required by law. And also covers our extracurricular activities, like our clubs, our intergalactic athletics, and our intramurals. At this point in the budget process, when we added the 2000 codes to those 3 codes that I spoke about in the previous slide, we're looking at a budget-to-budget increase of 3.48%, just looking at the projected expenditures at this point in the budget process. The next step was to look at our staffing. And so what we're always trying to do as a school district, and certainly it is the aim of our team, is to enhance our instructional programs while maintaining our class size. And so we propose some additional teaching staff, which I'll explain in a minute, to add additional reading and math support at our elementary schools, streamline the delivery of reading instruction and intervention at the middle school, add special classes to better serve our community and limit the number of students who require outside placements, add more student choice at the secondary level. That means running AP courses and electives. Students have more variety in their transcripts that will make them more competitive for colleges. And finally, to better serve high school students with college and career readiness by adding a work-based learning coordinator and a career and guidance counselor at the high school. In all, when we looked at our overall staffing, we looked at an increase of 3.3 teachers, but an overall reduction in staff of 4.7 FTEs, which largely comes from our non-instructional staff and reductions in those areas. So we are looking to add a couple more teachers within the confines of the proposed budget to support these programs. And so in terms of staffing, overall, we're looking at a reduction of 4.7 staff members. This led to a summary or an update on our revenue and expenditures at this point during our 5th presentation. Again, our state aid, the governor has not released the budget. Word on the street is that our foundation aid may be restored, But long-term, the state is looking to reduce the amount of aid that they're giving to school districts. And they're gonna do that by reformulating the foundation aid formula. And so we don't know how that's gonna impact our school districts. So what we did, and our sort of mindset was, we're gonna proceed as if the cuts are gonna stay. And what that forced us to do is sort of be tight in our budgeting, frugal in our sort of expenditures. Because again, we had seen a 3% increase in foundation aid year to year. And this is the first year actually it was reduced by 1%. Our miscellaneous revenue went up, and as much as we hate high interest rates, a lot of that bump was because we have money in the bank. And so we're getting more interest from that money that we have in our reserves, in our general fund. So that helped bump up our miscellaneous revenue for the upcoming school year. The use of reserves is somewhat different. We're using a little bit more of our reserves to sort of mitigate this sort of gap in our budget. Again, the idea is that our reserves are healthy, and that's why you have reserves, exactly for times like this where you may have to use the reserves a little more, and we may not be able to replenish as much as we have in the past, because typically we've kept our fund balances pretty level, and they've increased slightly every year. This may be the first year where we may not see that. Should the foundation aid be restored, obviously we'll replenish the reserves, and then we'll take another look at it in the upcoming school year. The 25-26 school years, that sounds really futuristic. And again, our tax levy, our final tax levy limit for the upcoming budget was 2.7%. So, as you may know, our balanced budget means that our revenue has to match our expenditures. So we matched our expenditures, we're continued to reduce our expenditures, and where we landed was an overall budget-to-budget increase of $2.1 million in change, which represents, again, a 2.7% tax levy increase when you compare tax levy to tax levy, which I'll explain in our final budget, which is this. This is our final proposed budget. First, again, the final tax levy of the proposed budget based upon the difference in our current budget and the next budget is 2.7% was the tax levy. Sorry, I misspoke. Our proposed tax levy went up from $67 million to $69 million. Our tax levy limit for the proposed budget was 2.7%. When we look at the expenditures, budget to budget, when you compare it, we're looking at an increase of 1.54%. This isn't the tax levy that we're asking for, but I think it's important to look at how much our expenditures were increased in our proposed budget. Current CPI is somewhere in the 3% range. It was 4% a little earlier. So we think this is a very reasonable sort of increase considering the rising costs and some of the fuel and benefits and those types of things. So in the end, our final proposed tax levy we're proposing for our community is going to be our tax cap of 2.7%. So just in summary, in terms of our final budget proposal, we're looking at a 1.54 budget-to-budget increase or a 2.7% tax levy increase when you compare last year's tax levy to this year's tax levy. Again, this proposed tax levy requires a simple majority vote to pass, and I would encourage our community to come out to vote. We also did a 5-year projection based on this new information, and what I want to emphasize is 5-year projections will change year after year, not because they're not accurate, but I'll say this, they're never accurate because they're based on assumptions. And so you have to look at the knowledge and the information that we have at the time we make projections. What I want to point out about these projections, number one, is that the projections reflect reductions in foundation aid for the years 2025 and 2026, which again is where we think that the state is going, the direction the state is going in, with a slight increase in subsequent years of about 1%. Because inevitably, with the rising costs of living, we foresee aid going up. And again, we use a conservative number to make our projections. The projections also reflect the addition of salary benefits costs that were offset by federal funds in previous years, with an estimated increase of 2% in subsequent years. What that means, if you look at year 2024, our cost for salary and benefits was about $90 million, and then it jumps up to almost $95 million. It's not that we added $5 million in expenses, is we were using the federal funds to offset those expenses. So ultimately, the district, out of its general fund, spent about $90 million. Next year, moving forward, we'll be spending or covering the cost of that entirely from our general fund. So that initial year shows that big increase. Subsequent to that, we're projecting a 2% increase in those costs. The projections also reflect the end of bond payments in 2027, which may result in a negative tax levy in 2028. And that's because the bond payments are a part of our 8-point formula. And we'll see how that sort of works out way in the future in 2028. And the projections do not reflect any aid that may be gained from our current capital improvement projects. And the reason we didn't include those, because we don't know when those projects will be completed. Right now, most of our projects, in fact, all of our projects, are up waiting state approval. The turnaround time from the state is apparently 18 to 24 months, which doesn't sound pleasing to us, but it's just a reality we have to face. And we don't start generating aid until the projects are completed. So we didn't use any projected aid in our projections. So basically where you see budget deficits, especially in the upcoming school year, it's pretty much aligned with the cuts in foundation aid, about $1.2 million. And this is where our deficits are mitigated by the strategic use of reserves. And again, the idea is if the foundation aid is restored, we won't have to use the reserves to that extent. And next year, when we propose another 5-year projection, my expectation is going to look somewhat different, because I feel like the climate's going to change up at the state, and we have to see where we land in terms of the state's position on giving school districts foundation aid. And so as a reminder, one more thing. So when we come to the budget vote later in May, we're going to have 3 propositions that were voted on and approved by the board. Proposition number 1 is going to be an authorization of the tax levy increase, which is 2.7%, and also a vote for the vacant trustee positions. The second proposition is going to be use of the capital reserve. This is we have 2 existing capital reserves currently. We have one that was established about 10 years ago that has a little over $937,000 remaining in it. This is not the new capital reserve that we established last year. So we're going to use those remaining funds to finally restore our high school auditorium and really renovate it, which includes the removal and replacement of the auditorium seating, removal and replacement of the auditorium floor and carpets, complete painting of the auditorium space, and an upgrade to the sound and lighting systems. This is something we want to accomplish because it's much needed work. We certainly, if we can accelerate this process, we will. And the final proposition, which I'm really excited about, is expansion of the high school bus routes. We're looking to expand high school bus service. Right now, you need to live 1.5 miles or more away from the high school to be eligible for busing. We're going to reduce that range to 1 mile, which will affect a little over 80 students at the high school, giving them access to buses where they didn't have that access before. And this is cost neutral. And when I say that, the cost of transportation goes up every year. The expansion of these bus routes doesn't represent any additional cost. And we were able to accomplish this by working with a transportation consultant for a little over a year to make this happen with Town Bus. So we're excited about this because I think it's going to help a lot of students get to school in the morning. And that concludes my budget presentation. Our budget hearing will be on May 8th. We'll be doing some budget road shows in between now and then. And our budget vote is upcoming on May 21st, which seems a little far away, but it's going to be here before you know it. At this point, I'll ask the board of trustees if they have any questions.
All right, we'll go around the horseshoe. I believe Cameron had his,
Yeah, just
hand
a
up first.
quick question, Mr. Santana. I thought that you had proposed creating a new capital reserve
We did last year.
last year, but not one for this year.
No, so last year we established a reserve that would be funded up to, I think, $8 million. We currently have about $4.1 million in that reserve. So this $900,000, or $937,000 is based on the old reserve.
So after this one, we'll only have 2 standing reserves.
We'll have one.
One, because that one will be spent. Gotcha.
Anything else, trustee Trent?
No, that's it, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay.
I just had a question, and I don't know who necessarily to address, but I'm just curious about the expansion of the high school bus routes and why that needs to go up as a proposition if it's cost neutral.
It's the law.
It is a law?
Yeah. So anytime you change bus routes in the school district, it requires voter approval. Regardless if it's a cost neutral or not.
Right.
Okay.
My turn.
Vice President Hayes, yes.
The budget that you're presenting, you're able to maintain class sizes that we've been seeing the last few years?
Yes.
Okay. And you're gonna have enough staff to provide services to all of our students, to maintain what we have, but also to give the extra services that you mentioned, like the career readiness and also the special attention to the reading in order to get our students reading at a better level so that as they go up through the grades, they'll be on grade level.
Yeah, and the research shows that like if you're not reading at grade level in grade 3, it really kind of hinders your ability to catch up moving forward as you progress through the grades. So that's why we want to focus on the earlier grades. And again, we're not looking to reduce staff. We're looking to actually add 3.3. Sounds funny when I say 3.3 teachers, but 3.3 FTEs to help support those programs.
And just a general comment that I'm really proud of South Country for how it's handled the budgets over the last few years, because we're not in the position like a lot of school districts are that we're reading about in the paper, where you're looking at staff layoffs. We don't have that. We're keeping our teachers, we're keeping our classes, and we're even adding additional services. So I'm very proud of the district for that.
No, I appreciate those comments. I wish I could take credit, but this was something that happened prior to my arrival. And what we did differently was a lot of school districts used the federal funds to add programs. South Country did it. They used the federal funds to offset expenditures so that we could maintain the programs once those federal funds exaggerated.
Do we have another robotics person?
Yeah.
All right.
We'll take a pause. Your name is Alejandro? All right, so this is Alejandro Orellana Tecuy?
Yes.
Late, I'm sorry, I wasn't sure like which location it was.
That's all right. You missed a group shot, but.
Congratulations.
Do you want to get a,
Why don't you get a picture
why don't you get a picture?
with the
Do a selfie.
superintendent?
Do a selfie. Do a selfie.
I have to do it.
I think I just went out looking at stuff.
Mom,
Ah, yes, I'm on.
all right, congratulations, Ned. Take a picture together first.
Extend the arm.
Sorry for the interruption.
No, it's okay, that's a happy interruption.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for coming, and congratulations again.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Good night. Have a good night.
Good night. Good night.
So, yeah, so just to reiterate, so I think that was very strategic on South Country's part. And, yeah, some school districts are really being decimated by these cuts. We hear about school districts like Abbeville, who are laying off 30-plus teachers, potentially closing down a school. We're not anywhere near that. So, again, we have to be very frugal. There are certain things we thought about, sort of adding, and, we're gonna take a little pause, and we have to see how things play out in the next year or two. And then we'll, again, the budget process is an annual process, and so much can change between now and next year.
But this budget allows progress to be made on some of those areas that we're trying to deal with under the improvement plans that are in place. This has the proposal for the targeted interventions at the lower grades for reading in particular.
Yeah, and one of the things I always emphasize that, when you're looking to make improvements in student achievement and performance, it's not always more funds that are necessary. Sometimes you have to change strategies and practices. And that's what really, with the help of Beth Doyle and our whole administrative team, and our teachers, this is what we're trying to do, is try to do things a little bit differently. And again, education's a very fluid process because, expectations change and our students change. The students who sit in our classrooms today aren't the students who sat in our classrooms 10 years from now. The strategies that were used 10 years ago that were successful, aren't necessarily going to be successful now. And so we have to continue modifying, and I'm not even going to get started with the role AI will play in school of instructional technology. And just in the course of my career, When I started as a teacher, my instructional technology was comprised of a chalk holder. And I felt like that was the fanciest thing I had. Yeah, probably not what you that loyal. But there was a fancy chalk holder, and I put my chalk in it, and I felt like I was the man. We also had these like grids we'll put out on the blackboard, and you would hit with the eraser to create a graph on the board. I'm dating myself. But that's basically the instructional technology we had. No computers. Kids hand wrote their notes and their reports. And look at where we are now.
Any other questions? I just want to bring you back to the slide about the reserves, slide 10, I believe that is. If we could just go back there for just a quick minute. So this board has typically taken a very conservative approach to using the reserves. And I just wanted you to reiterate what you said about the strategy of, you know, because of the cut in the foundation aid, you had to use a little bit more of the, we had to use a little bit more of the reserves to make up the difference in this budget. But if the foundation aid is restored, we'll go back and we'll revisit that for the next time around. We just approved March treasurer's report, and I can't see Ms. Segee back there, but there you go, okay. I just want confirmation from you with the March report and what's left in, you know, available balances versus what was encumbered. Because quite a bit was encumbered this last month, about 37,000 was encumbered. 37 million was encumbered. That we're comfortable with the amount that we have left to fund the reserves that we've outlined here.
Yes.
Okay.
And the reason we encumber so much is because,
Thank you, Ms. Segee.
from a business perspective, we want to make sure we start the process of closing the books out. So we give a directive to our buildings and our administrators that no more spending as of March, what was your deadline?
March 1st.
March 1st, right. So, and the reason is that it's for planning purposes. Obviously, there's exceptions. If there's additional costs for graduation or things come up, there's monies available to cover those things. But we encumber it, which means the money's not spent yet, it's just accounted for to make sure that everything is covered.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Any final questions before we conclude with this budget presentation? Because we are taking a vote tonight. We adopt the budget tonight. I can move this to my screen here. Okay. So without any further, yes?
Ms. Solis, with respect to the budget adoption, is that what you're getting up to now?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So if everyone could refresh?
We have to refresh?
Yes.
Okay.
Go back to my seat.
Hold on 1 second. Wait, is there an actual resolution there? Is that why
That's one update.
we are refreshing? Okay.
Roll call vote.
Oh, I see. Okay, good. Okay. Got it. All right, so the budget has been presented, the questions have been asked, and there's a resolution before you. Upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby adopts an expenditure appropriation of $143,057,785 to operate the school for the 2024-2025 fiscal year and present such appropriation to the district residents for approval on May 21st, 2024. This will require a roll call vote, which will be called by the district clerk. There's no need for a motion or a second with a roll call vote? We still have to make a motion and a motion and a second. All right, we need a motion by trustee Barry.
Make sure that,
The superintendent is
commitment
recommending?
Is
Yeah,
recommended.
the superintendent recommends the adoption of the proposed budget as outlined by the resolution in our agenda.
Thank you. And we have a motion by trustee Barry, seconded by trustee Kavanaugh. Okay, would the district clerk proceed with the roll call vote, please?
So Joe? Trustee Barry?
I vote in favor.
Trustee Flippin? Trustee Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Trustee Pacini?
Yes.
Trustee Trent?
Yes.
Trustee, Vice President Hayes?
Yes.
President Luis?
Yes.
Thanks, it was unanimous.
So the motion to adopt the budget and present it to the residents has been approved unanimously. Thank you very much for the Board of Education, to our cabinet for putting together a well-rounded budget, and certainly to our superintendent for all the work that you have put in, not only this year, but in last year, in making our budget process, even more transparent, year after year. So let's give ourselves a round of applause.
I'm looking forward to going on tour to present the budget.
All right. All right, next items for discussion, we have 3 policies that are for the second reading. And I do have to say hats off to Vice President Hayes, who serves on the policy rewriting committee, because she is a wordsmith second to none. And so she takes great pride in these policies. So we presented them first, we presented them, and this is the second time. If anybody has any questions, we can take them. Well, are you going to recommend all 3?
Yes. The administration recommends the approval of policy coded 8330, 8320, and 8140.
Okay, so items F2,
I'm sorry.
3, and 4. All right, do we have a motion to approve?
Can I make a comment? So I want to give,
Well, let's get the motion in the
Get the motion
second.
second.
okay.
So motion by trustee Barry, seconded by trustee Kavanaugh. We have a motion and a second to approve. Discussion. Vice
I
President
want to
Hayes.
comment about how much I appreciate our Assistant Superintendent Beth Doyle for all the work she's put into these.
Could we move this darn
policy.
podium, please?
There's gonna be
Well,
another
I don't know,
presentation.
I got it.
I tried to stop it last time.
Presentation.
But
Thank you.
what I'm observing by what she's doing is she's getting these policies interwoven with all the practices that are being implemented, like the restorative circles, the code of conduct, and everything that's going into educating our students. So I just wanted to let you know how much I appreciate that.
Thank you. There's about 4 more coming. Well, then hats off to you too.
Thank you.
I would say boots off.
All right, are there any other questions or discussion on the items F2, 3, and 4? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hands. Seeing all hands raised, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And I believe that concludes our agenda, with the exception of public commentary for non-agenda items. Do we have any cards? We have no cards. Okay, brings us to closing remarks. Do we have any closing remarks by any other board members? And that brings us to the coveted motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn by trustee Trent, seconded by trustee Barry. All those in favor? Seeing all hands raised, we stand adjourned.